What's up, guys? It's MB Boxing, and today I'm going to be predicting the outcome of Luis Alberto Lopez versus Joet Gonzalez, and this is going to be a 12-rounder for the IBF Featherweight World Championship, and this fight is going to be Friday, September 15th, from the American Bank Center in Corpus Christi, Texas, and this fight is going to be broadcasted on ESPN, ESPN Plus, or on the ESPN app. And to get both fighters' resumes, Luis Alberto Lopez, fighting out of Mexico, holds a record of 28 wins, 2 defeats, with 16 wins coming by way of knockout. He is currently ranked number 4 by BoxRec in the featherweight division, and he is the current reigning IBF featherweight champion of the world. So to get into Lopez's losses, his wins, he's lost by unanimous decision some years ago against Ruben Villa, and he also does have a split decision defeat to Abraham Montoya, but since then, he's really bounced back and has gotten excellent victories and became a world champion. As in his last 2 fights, he was able to get a TKO win in the 5th round over Michael Conlan, a very impressive win that was. I did post highlights on that fight. I would appreciate it if you guys could go check that out. And then he also defeated Josh Warrington by majority decision to win the IBF world title. And then prior to those fights, he has some very solid wins over Isaac Lowe, who he knocked out in the 7th. He does have a unanimous decision victory, a dominant one over Gabriel Flores Jr., and he also has a split decision victory over Andy Vences. But to get into his opponent's resume, Joet Gonzalez, fighting out of the United States, he holds a record of 26 wins, 3 losses, with 15 wins coming by way of knockout. He is currently ranked number 13 by BoxRec in the featherweight division, and he's also a 2-time former world title challenger. He challenged for the WBO world title twice. And to get into some of his losses and his best wins, he's lost really to very high-level competition. He's lost by unanimous decision to Shakur Stevenson, lost by unanimous decision in an all-out war against Emmanuel Navarrete, and he had a very solid performance in that one. Was giving Navarrete all he could handle, especially in some of those later rounds. It was a very, very good fight. I did post highlights on that fight as well, and I would appreciate it if you guys go check that out too. And then his most recent defeat, he lost by split decision to Isaac Dogbe, and I personally thought that he should have won that fight. So just to get into some of his best victories, Joet Gonzalez has defeated Enrique Vivas by unanimous decision. He has a TKO winner in the 9th round over Gio Santissima, and he also has a unanimous decision victory over former title challenger Miguel Mariaga. So in my opinion, this fight is going to be a very, very good one. I'm very excited for this one, and I think it's going to be much, much closer than what most people think. I believe that Luis Alberto Lopez is like a 7-1 favorite or a 6-1 favorite going into this fight, something crazy like that. But I definitely think the odds should for sure be closer on this one. Luis Alberto Lopez, I know he's coming off of 2 very good wins. But, obviously the old adage in boxing is styles make fights, and I think that perfectly plays out here. Joet Gonzalez is completely different from both Josh Warrington and Michael Conlan. Both of those guys, specifically Michael Conlan. Michael Conlan is known for being a pretty chinny guy. He doesn't really go in there and scrap with his opponents. He tries to box, use his southpaw jab, box on the outside, try and score points and counter his opponent. But that's completely opposite from Joet Gonzalez, who's a Hispanic fighter, and Hispanic fighters are just so tough and rugged. Michael Conlan, really, he's not the fighter that you think of that has the most heart in the sport and has the best chin, and that's completely opposite from Joet Gonzalez, who has a very, very good chin, has rarely been hurt in his career, and has gone 12 in a war with Navarrete, went 12 with Shakur Stevenson. He's always there to fight and puts up always a tough test for anyone he faces, especially the higher level guys. And then when it comes to Josh Warrington, even for Luis Alberto Lopez, I feel like Joet Gonzalez could be a tougher fight than Josh Warrington. And it's basically the same reasons as before. Those British fighters aren't as tough and rugged as these Mexican fighters. And in Luis Alberto Lopez's past, he's had tougher fights with these Mexican fighters or other Hispanic fighters who just go in there and just try and go to war with their opponents. Even when he fought, I know Ruben Villa is obviously sort of an opposite. He's Hispanic fighter who likes to box a bit. But I mean, even with that, like Ruben Villa, he likes to throw very fast, very hard combinations in numbers. And that's a trademark of some of these like Hispanic, Mexican fighters. They just love to throw huge, fast combinations. And even when Luis Alberto Lopez fought Andy Vences, he had a very, very tough time in that fight as well. So really, Luis Alberto Lopez, he's a very unorthodox fighter. He has some very weird ways of when he throws combinations. He throws his punches from the hip. Not very technical, not very technically gifted, but he's a very, very underrated fighter. His awkward style is very, very hard to read. At one moment, he'll be some feet away from you out of punching range, and then he'll just leap forward with a huge hook or an uppercut from his hip. And he does carry a lot of power as well. So, I mean, he really makes for a tough fight for anyone, and he's arguably the number one guy at 126 pounds right now. I really think it's either between him or Lee Wood. But as for Joet Gonzalez, like I said before, he's a very, very tough fighter, has a very, very good chin. I don't really think we're going to see a stoppage in this one. I know a lot of people are picking stoppage. I don't see it happening either way because both of these guys are really Mexican warriors. They both have very good chins. Just go out there and make their fights fun. And these are two guys that have had excellent fights in the past. Joet Gonzalez, a lot of his fights are very fun wars, and Luis Alberto Lopez, even like he always has very, very good fights. The Warrington fight was a good, competitive, fun fight to watch, along with the Michael Conlan fight, which ended in a knockout win for Lopez, like I mentioned earlier. But just to get into this fight and how I see it going down, I think that the earlier rounds will be more in favor of Luis Alberto Lopez, if I'm going to be honest. Joet Gonzalez is known for not being the fastest starter. He's known for sort of easing into the fight and making the fight really, really close in the later rounds. But in this one, I think it's going to be very similar to what we've seen in the past. I think Luis Alberto Lopez, he's more of... I mean, he has some success... He has a lot of his success in the earlier rounds of his fights, especially when he fought Josh Warrington. He was doing very, very well early, and then the later rounds sort of caught up to him, and he was getting hit with some good combinations from Warrington late. And, I mean, for Joet Gonzalez, like I mentioned before, he's more of a late-round fighter. Against Emmanuel Navarrete, he won a good amount of those later rounds because of his gas tank. And then even against Isaac Dogbe, the first... I personally thought, and a lot of people did think that Joet Gonzalez won most of those later rounds, but it was just depending on how you scored the first half, because the first half was really competitive in my opinion, but the later half was definitely in Joet Gonzalez's favor. So yeah, I mean, that's also another example on one of his higher profile fights of how he sort of just comes back in those later rounds. And in this one, I think that Joet Gonzalez will probably be down, like maybe, let's say after 4 or 5 rounds. Like after 4 rounds, he could be down like 39-37 on the scorecards. After 5, could be 49-46. Like really, I think Luis Alberto Lopez is going to get out to a start where he gets to put up a decent lead on the scorecards just by being the more active man. And in this one, I don't necessarily think that one of them is going to box, the other one's going to brawl. Both of these guys are known for brawling in their fights, so I think that it will somewhat be fought at mid-range, or should I say in the center of the ring. Both of these guys moving forward, maybe moving backward for a second, and then just going right back at it. Like, I really don't think they're going to have much separation in this fight because both these guys are just known for scrapping in there. So when it comes to the second half of this fight, or let's just say the first half, like I said before, I think Luis Alberto Lopez is just going to be more active. He's going to start stronger like he usually does, as opposed to Joet Gonzalez, who usually starts later. And after 6 rounds, could be 59-55 or 58-56 in Luis Alberto Lopez's favor. And then when the second half of the fight starts, I think Joet Gonzalez will start to ease in a bit. He might be able to take 1 or 2 of those rounds, maybe round 7 or 8, or maybe one of them. I just think that when the second half starts, he'll start to step on his gas pedal a bit, start to find more openings, figure out that awkward style of Luis Alberto Lopez. And let's say after 8 rounds, it could be 78-74, 77-75 in Luis Alberto Lopez's favor, something like that, I would say. And then the later rounds, I would say that, like, let's say from rounds 9 through 12, those 4 rounds, we could definitely see Joet Gonzalez taking maybe 3 out of the 4 or splitting it 2-2. But I definitely think that he'll have more success in those later rounds than in the earlier rounds. It just depends how active he is, because really this fight, I think the winner of each round is really going to be based on activity. Both of these guys throw very hard shots. And have good chins, but whoever's more active, whoever's the one throwing, landing more, is going to be the one catching the judge's eye. So, I mean, that most likely will be Luis Alberto Lopez, who who throws a lot and lands a lot of eye-catching shots. So, yeah, in those later rounds, I think that Joet Gonzalez will have sizable success like a lot of his other fights, but I think that it could be pretty competitive rounds that Joet Gonzalez could edge, but I just don't think it'll be enough in the end on the judges' scorecards and in the judges' eyes. And I think that ultimately, I think it will be a really, really close fight when it gets down to the numbers and who won each round and punches landed. I think it could be pretty close. But in the end, I see this fight possibly being like a 6-6 fight. Maybe 7-5, 8-4. It could be on the judges' scorecards. But yeah, I think this fight's going to be really, really close, if I'm going to be 100% honest. I mean, like you just heard in my breakdown, both these guys have very fun, very fan-friendly styles, and I think it's going to be a very good fight, very exciting fight. So in the end, I think this fight goes the distance, like I mentioned before, and I think that the judges will turn out scorecards, all three in favor of the defending world champion. I mean, Luis Alberto Lopez is the champ, so I think they'll have more favoritism in his favor. It could be a majority decision, but most likely I think the judges will have this one like 115, 113, 116, 112 in Luis Alberto Lopez's favor. One judge could have a 114, 114, but I mean, I would definitely say a decision victory for Luis Alberto Lopez, but it's either a close unanimous decision, I would say, or a majority decision victory for Luis Alberto Lopez. So overall, I believe that Luis Alberto Lopez will pick up yet another title defense, as I think he will defeat Joet Gonzalez by decision to retain his IBF title. And again, that's really it. I'm MB Boxing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.